Many students are going crazy on campus against Israel, against Jews, from the river to the sea, masquerading themselves. What is going on? What is motivating them? Interesting conversation over here. Listen in, and on the flip side, let's have a conversation.
As the Bebas children were being buried with their mother in Israel, at Barnard College, one of the most expensive schools, one of the most elite schools in the country, you had students taking over a building, cheering for Hamas would be a polite way to put it. How does that happen?
Well, this is a thin, new ideology that probably I don't think is going to survive, but it is religious in the technical sense that you can't verify the assumptions, because asking if the assumptions are right is heresy. And so that's the religious side. I think the pagan side of the religion really comes out when they're praying to their high god of anti-Semitism. And then you have a separate issue of why is this movement pretty fixated on violating its core principle of anti-discrimination by discriminating against Jewish people, the oldest minority in the history, consistent minority in the history of human civilization. And I think the reason why it's particularly aggressive on those issues is it is violative of the core premise of the religious side of the equation, that you would have a minority that is discriminated against and successful. And that's pretty enraging. So I also think, obviously, the Jewish community is a stand-in for larger, Western culture, or participants in Western culture, particularly people who would be viewed as West, i.e. white males are bad. So, but it's like a hyper version of that. And then there's something, I think, quite subtle that I talked about more in my dissertation than I do in the book, which is people assume that a contradiction will render an ideology ineffectual. But I think in political contexts, contradictions can be quite charismatic. And so the obvious contradiction of this is turns it into a feeding frenzy of, the ideology can't make sense, and therefore it's sensible, and therefore we can, burn effigies. I mean, the pure aesthetics of it is if you had, I'm very pro First Amendment, so I'm in favor of annoying, inappropriate speech right up to the standard as elucidated by the Supreme Court, so danger, direct, threatening. But if you just turned off the volume and watched what's happening in these conferences or these campuses, you would think it's a reenaction of the KKK, masked, everyone's masked, they're burning things. Looks kind of like the KKK, but it's so even that should be an aesthetic. But it's that in that inversion that I think the movement becomes quite charismatic, and so it is. And one of the most interesting things about that movement is a charismatic, thin pagan religion can bring together Hamas and the feminist department of a university, and it's these are people that don't work well together, but there's no actual, the contradiction is charismatic.
Pretty fascinating. So first of all, about free speech and the First Amendment. So from a Jewish perspective, we have responsibilities, not just rights, and responsibility is for healthy speech and good speech. That's one important thing to appreciate. Now, the contradiction, which leads to faith in these people, that they do things contradictory, right? That they are there for those who are, to not make discrimination, and yet they're discriminating. It, leads to the contradiction, and therefore their faith goes in a frenzy because it's beyond logic, and therefore it must be logical. It was an interesting point. So it reminds me of a story of the Rebbe Rashab, one of the Chabad Rebbes. He was in a museum and looking at a painting of a battle, an army waging in a battle very intently. And he was asked, Rebbe, what do you see there? He says, well, I want to see the fine line of a difference, of the distinction between what it means transcending the human spirit in sacrifice of your life and that which is degradation and um, and being, less than the human condition. They're worlds apart, but the discernment between the two is a hairbreadth of a difference. Whoa, which let me translate. For me, the IDF soldiers are transcending the human condition and, the human spirit in what they are doing in being a protectorate of the land of Israel and of its citizens and of its people. Now they're fighting a battle. At the same time, there's someone else fighting a battle. Well, ceasefire in the moment, but you have Hezbollah, you have Hamas, and they're also fighting a battle. They're also with a gun, right? And some people look at them as freedom fighters. They're really a degradation. They're less than, not more than the human spirit. They're less than the human spirit. But to perceive the idea for the soldier with a gun, Hamas, Hezbollah, and others with a gun, seemingly, tit for tat, the same. The discernment to see that one's beyond the human spirit and one is less than the human spirit is a hairbreadth sometimes. And that's what the story is telling us. Same thing as over here with these students. You think, wow, they're really giving of themselves. They're really like, fighting for a cause, which, the fact that a person has a cause in their life that itself has a value to it and a meaning to it. But this cause is one of not transcending the human spirit. It's a degradation to the human spirit. To appreciate that might sometimes be a hairbreadth of a difference. Truth is, I don't think in this instance it really is. I think it's so obvious that it is a degradation to the human spirit. What are your thoughts on that?